Call the meeting to order. This is the October 27, 2015 meeting of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission for the Town of Fairfield. First item of business are bills and communications. The first is meeting minutes from October 13, 2015. So who's sitting for Anthony right now?
It'll be Tommy's turn.
Commissioner Noonan, you're sitting in for Commissioner Calabrese. He will be here by 8 o'clock.
I actually looked at all this before. I just don't have my stuff because I couldn't get home in time. I just came right off the train. Yeah, I find it fairly late.
First item on the agenda is the meeting minutes from October 13, 2015. Can I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion approved by Commissioner Alessi.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kennelly. Everybody have a copy of that? Any questions, additions, corrections? I took a look, I didn't see anything. Okay, ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously. Next item is 5401 Park Avenue, request of Sacred Heart University for a 50% release of a $325,314 bond pertaining to special exception improvements in the R3 zone.
This is Sacred Heart School of Business on the corner of Park Avenue and Jefferson Street. They're mostly done. They've got a couple housekeeping things. The big ticket issue is the state is still, the approval of the redesign of the traffic light is still sitting on the state's desk. And we're still holding money for that. It's not a specific itemized bond, but the engineering department is not comfortable with a recommendation on the full release until that's done. But certainly 50% is, and they'd still be over $160,000 left in the bond. So they're comfortable with a 50% release.
Motion to approve? Motion to approve by Commissioner Kennelly.
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Barretts. We have, I don't remember seeing a note. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks. I was looking for that earlier and I forgot to find it.
Holding the bond going to get them to move any faster on this?
Sacred Heart will do it in a second. It's they're waiting on the state. Right. So the Sacred Heart is ready to install and get it done, but they have to get the approval from state DOT, and it's just kind of stuck in that bureaucracy.
Okay. Any other discussion?
That's a big thing of the traffic signals. It's a big item. Certain fact that that's for the students to go back and forth across. So, I mean, it's not like we're talking about striping parking lines in the parking lot. We're talking about the traffic signals at the intersection of Park Avenue and Jefferson. That's what I have to say.
We'll have $160,000 left in reserve on bond. Do you think that's
It's still a lot of money to hold.
Yeah. The engineering department thinks that the $160,000 is sufficient to cover them?
What about the concrete sidewalk?
What's that?
What about the concrete sidewalk? That wasn't.
There's a piece. If you look, the curbing was done all the way up. Their site improvements end at the property line, but there's another piece that they own where there's a field. They extended the curb all the way up to the next curb cut north on Park Avenue, but the sidewalk ends. They need to do about another 50 feet of sidewalk. That's north of the building's frontage from the corner of Park Avenue to its driveway on Park Avenue is done in sidewalk. There's a little piece beyond the driveway, between the driveway and the ball field that they share with Notre Dame High School, that has yet to be done. But again, well under the $160,000 and that we would still be holding.
Okay, have anything more?
No.
Okay, anybody else have any more comments? Ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
All in favor except Commissioner Alessi. The item passes. Next item is the discussion of the December meeting date. This is on the agenda at my request. There was a conflict that came up for me on December 8th. And 15th looked like next good date, 1 week later, next Tuesday, 15th. And so I would entertain a motion to reschedule our December meeting from December 8th to December 15th at 7:30, same time.
I'll make a motion to do that, to move the meeting date from December 8th to December 15th, I assume here at McKinley at 7:30?
Actually, it would not be.
No?
This room's not available, but we could use the Board of Ed facility on Kings Highway.
So 501 Kings
Yeah,
Highway
501,
East?
yeah.
Okay. Well, that would be the motion then.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Kennelly. Motion by Commissioner Kennelly.
I'll second.
Thanks. Second by Commissioner Alessi. So I'd just like to express thanks to everyone for their accommodation. Does anyone else have any other comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? And the motion carries unanimously. Thanks, everybody. I'd like to, I know that we have the town attorney, Attorney Stanton Lesser in the gallery here tonight. We have a couple of outstanding litigation items, and I understand that we can get an update and close the executive session. It's not on our agenda, so I would need to entertain a motion first to add to the agenda that we go into closed executive session with the town attorney for a litigation update. We'd need a 2/3 vote to add it to the agenda. Once it's on the agenda, then we need another vote to go into closed executive session, also by a 2/3 vote.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to add item D, I guess it would be, to have a closed executive session to discuss pending litigation with the town attorney.
Thank you. So motion made by Commissioner Barrett and seconded by Commissioner Alessi to add the item to the agenda. Anyone have any comments on that? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The item, the motion passes unanimously. So now, item D, it's closed executive session with the town attorney to update on pending litigation.
Make a motion to pass item D. Approve item D.
Motion by Commissioner Kennelly to go into closed executive session. Second by Commissioner Alessi. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We're in closed executive session. Back on the record. So we're adjourned from closed executive session. No decisions were made, no votes were taken. Next item on the agenda is old business, 4185 Black Rock Turnpike, zone change application of New Way Associates LLC to establish a design commercial district on land presently zoned Neighborhood Design District and AAA.
All right, Mr. Chairman, what I'll do is just go briefly over what was presented at the public hearing. It will be brief. If there's any questions, please ask me, but I'm sure most of the commission is relatively familiar with what's being proposed on this piece of property. The property is located on the south side of Black Rock Turnpike. The entire piece of property is 17.27 acres. As we know, on April 20th, 2015, the TPC denied an application for a zone change on this property in the construction of a two-story, 25,000 square foot medical office building. This decision is currently under appeal, as we know. The applicant included a separate, at that point, approval for approximately 2.5 acres parcel for the office building. With the previous application, the proposal in front of you, which is, again, similar with the one that was denied back in April, is to remove the existing plant factory structure and construct a single two-story, 25,000 square foot medical office building. As the commission knows, this is basically two separate actions. First, what you need to do is review and act upon the requested zone change, and then at that point, if the zone change, depending on how the zone change is decided, you would react to the special permit application. The last application, there was really no discussion as to the special permit, other than it was not consistent with the zoning. because in that application, you denied the zone change. All right, so with the chairman's okay, what I'll do is I've done in the past, you've heard these very well before, is I'm going to go overview for you what your findings are to be whenever you receive or review a zone change application. When do you want to give you information on the...
Whatever you want.
All right. Let me go through those first, and then we have some added information having to do with the zone change itself, and the procedure. Again, let me just make sure I have it. Okay. As you know, the application for zone change has certain findings that you must find that are based on state statutes that enable you to do what you do. It gives you authority to change zones, and also as established through court decisions that help identify and define what the statutes, our intents are. And very simply, there's 6 of them, and the first one is that you must find, is the proposal consistent with the plan of conservation development? Number 2, does time, experience, and reasonable planning for contemporary or future conditions indicate the need for proposed zone change? Number 3, have circumstances in the neighborhood changed substantial enough to merit the requested zone change? Number 4, has it been demonstrated that the proposed zone change is warranted and would serve the general health, welfare, and safety of the town of Fairfield? Number 5, does the proposed zone change promote a level of development that would serve to protect property values in the neighborhood or enhance the community? And number 6, does the proposed zone change permit a level of development that would increase undue traffic congestion? Those are the findings you need to make in your deliberation of this zone change or any zone change. At that point, just some additional information on the procedure.
I'm passing this out. There was some discussion at the hearing and with respect to whether or not has anything substantially changed within the zone, with respect to the zone change piece. Has there been a material change that would lead you to render a different decision than you made last time? What this material indicates is that when you're acting on a zone change, you're acting in a legislative capacity, and when you're doing so, you're not necessarily bound by previous similar actions. There's, in the latter part of that section, there's a provision, if you go to the second page of the material, about 2/3 of the way down the paragraph right after footnote 4, there's an example of a case where the commission rendered a decision on a zone change. On an appeal, the case was remanded back to the commission on a defective notice, but after they went back to a hearing, had an additional hearing, the commission changed their mind. So the question of a material or substantial change is not necessarily binding on your decision on a particular zone change. You can certainly come to the same conclusion that you came to on the previous application, or you can, because we've had additional hearing, you can come to a different conclusion, but you're not necessarily bound to the previous decision. That's what we wanted to provide for you.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, prior to us discussing the special permit aspect of the application, I would just stop now and you can deliberate on the findings.
So the item that's been called is the zone change. We're not treating these together. These are separate issues.
Yes.
Okay. Correct. Right. All the regular, and so all the regular members were in attendance either at the hearing or reviewed the tapes? Yes? All right, so it's all of our regular members. Okay. Is it open for discussion? Can I have a motion? I'm sorry, Commissioner Noonan, do you have a question? Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi,
I'll second for discussion purposes.
second by Commissioner Kennelly. Okay. So, well, we did have some discussion from staff. Thank you for that. Providing us some research on the issue of considering this application in light of the prior decision. Yes, the town attorney is here and would like to make a statement.
Right here.
I think you take the podium and...
Yes, come here.
Oh, sit over there? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stanton Lester, Town Attorney. It's my understanding that at the public hearing, there was some discussion about whether or not this commission had the right to impose conditions if it decided to grant the application and change the zone. And to the extent that you were told by either the applicant's attorney or that he referred to me that that is the case, I just want to correct that. To the extent that you heard that, that is incorrect, that you do not have the right to condition your approval on any kind of covenants or restrictions, deed restrictions. You cannot require, even if the applicant were to offer one, you would not be allowed to require that. I just want that clear on the record, that you can't do that. And to the extent that Mr. Wendt just gave you the information about the decision, I think what he's saying is correct. That is the law.
Right. So just for clarification, the deed restriction that was referred to in the public hearing could be granted in favor of a private party adjoining landowner, but could not be granted in favor of the town.
And any deed restriction, any private deed restriction would have no bearing on your deliberations. You could not take that into account. You're strictly applying the zoning laws.
Okay,
So
very good.
they would have, that would be between parties, would not affect your deliberations.
Okay. And just for clarification, the piece that was handed out about the legal standards is an excerpt from a land use treatise, right? Fuller treatise, section 22.10, similar prior application zone changes, quote, whether or not the agency can reach a different result on a second application which is similar to a prior application depends primarily upon the agency's function. A zoning commission acting in a legislative capacity does not require a change in circumstances in order to rezone property or change zoning regulations, period.
One of the cases cited in that is Morningside Association versus Planning and Zoning Board of the City of Milford, 162 Connecticut, 154 at page 158, where the Supreme Court said the board acting in a legislative capacity was therefore not bound by the general rule which would prohibit it from reversing an earlier decision without evidence of a change of conditions.
So, with that background, we can consider this application anew and not be bound by our prior decision, regardless of whether we believe there's been a change in circumstance or not. Okay? All right. So, Commissioner Alessi, you want to start?
No.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Canella?
Okay, thanks.
I'll just go point by point about what would be required to do the zone change and why. In my case, I don't support it. The proposal should be consistent with the plan of conservation development. And I think any honest look at the plan of conservation development, you have to weigh these two interests that were presented. One is that we encourage development of medical facilities, but it's not really specifying where, and we've already done that, in my view, to a great extent with a number of positive votes on those kinds of facilities throughout town. However, it's also clear that there's pretty good evidence within the POCD that it's discouraged in this particular section of town to want to add more intensive commercial development to what's overwhelmingly a residential area. So I don't think it meets the first test, which is being consistent with the POCD. Time, experience, and responsible planning for temporary future conditions. there's a need for the change. I do agree that there is absolutely a need for some kind of change there. We can't go on with an old nursery and, and just kind of sitting there. Something should be done with that property. And I'm absolutely here on this commission open to some sort of change. It's this particular one I'm concerned about. The idea of changing about a 7/10 of an acre neighborhood design business district into a 2 1/4 acre commercial zone, and was otherwise a residential area, I don't think that's wise planning, and so I wouldn't support it on that basis. I do think, and again, I don't want to appear to be the squeaky wheel, and I don't want to be a person who's holding back what might be responsible change, but I do think that there's some sort of choice here to be made that might be working within close to something of the existing zoning that might be appropriate to meet that condition, but it doesn't today. Circumstances in the neighborhood have changed substantially enough to merit the change. I don't see a significant change in the neighborhood. It remains primarily residential. Also, I think it's important to note that generally the commission has looked in our Merritt Parkway entrance-exit areas. We've looked very much in askance at these kinds of developments, often just one exit up the road. We've looked at, we've denied applications for these kinds of medical facilities. Why? Because the relationship with the residential community and also the potential impact on traffic in a very difficult situation near the Merritt. So for me, that test isn't met. Has it been demonstrated that the zone change is warranted and will serve the general health and welfare and safety of the town? I did ask the expert from Galante and Associates about whether or not there was a significant change to the design and plan. He presented us the same traffic study, and it is worth noting that some of the commissioners who opposed this last time were very concerned with the traffic enough to vote against it. And so with it being the same thing in this case, at least, well, obviously the law says that we can, obviously change our minds. If one is hung their decision on the issues related to how safe it is, not much has changed there. It doesn't meet that test. Does it promote a level of development that would serve to protect property values in the neighborhood and enhance the community? I do think a nice development there can work and be good. But does it enhance this area? I don't think so. Neighbors who were not solicited by the developer did come of their own volition and expressed their concerns about potential commercial development creep in their residential neighborhood. And they may have concerns about this. So for me, I side with them, and generally I think that it probably, at least as presented to us, is not something, that is going to enhance it. And finally, would it permit a level of development that would increase undue traffic congestion? I do think so. That area is already a very difficult area to navigate with the hump in the road and all the rest of that. There's been no change, and as I said, I know other commissioners may have reinterpreted the data, but the data remains the same, and that data, at least in the previous hearing, was one that, that made them uncomfortable with approving this. So for those reasons, I would urge my colleagues to reject this application with an openness to something eventually going there, but it's more appropriate for the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kennelly. Commissioner Alessi?
I think the zone change is consistent for the area that we have there. I mean, across the street there is a motel, there is a restaurant, there is a liquor store there. The residents are overwhelmingly in favor of it. I don't think we received any letters from a neighbor saying that they didn't want it. I think that the medical practice will serve the residents the same way that we approved the project for OSG downtown at Sims. So, I mean, I think a good portion of people in Fairfield will go to this medical practice in town. I think it does enhance the area. The area is in blight and has been in blight for years now. And if anything, that is causing a major problem for the neighbors who may be trying to sell a house, and people who come to that area are looking at that blighted piece of property that's there now. Traffic, yes, there's going to be an increase in traffic. But, I live up there. I go past it every day, back and forth to work, so I know. There is going to be more traffic there, but it's going to be to the level that is going to cause such serious problems. I don't think so, but I'm already anticipating more traffic at that intersection coming and going from work. So I'm in favor of this zone change, and I think this is needed at this intersection.
Commissioner Coleman.
the law says we can change our minds, but I haven't. I voted for it last time, and I'll continue to support it this time. My one reservation was the traffic, but anything you do at that intersection is going to create more traffic. The plant factory is a defunct operation. There is no traffic generated by it. In order to reverse the blight that's developing in that corner, something's going to have to go in there that will cause more traffic, and hopefully the state will belly up to it and make what changes they have to make on Black Rock to make it a better flow. I think it does. I agree with everything else Commissioner Alessi said. I'm not going to repeat it.
Thank you. Commissioner Calabrese?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pretty much to piggyback off of what Commissioner Alessi and Commissioner Coleman just said, I too am going to support this project just like I did the last time. I do feel that we are in need of this type of facility on this piece of property. You do have the Hi-Ho, you have Barcelona right across the street, so it's already partly commercial there. The neighbors are overwhelmingly in support of this project. They made that clear the first go-around. They made it very clear the second go-around. As far as property values go, I mean, right now there's a dilapidated plant factory sitting there. That's the biggest complaint, one of the biggest complaints we get across town. So this facility there is a beautiful looking facility. I think it'll enhance the property values of everybody that's in the neighborhood there. Obviously traffic, there's going to be an increase in traffic. However, with the traffic plans that were being proposed and adjusted, you know, I think it's going to help alleviate some of the congestion that may be noticed. So I am in support of this project.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Barrett?
Yes, I appreciate what the town attorney said in not considering that deed restriction. So looking at that, really, this is the same application that we denied 6 months ago. So now, understanding that, I've kind of regret my decision to hear this again, because I'm not sure that circumstances have changed in the last 6 months. It's more a question of whether those of us who voted against it have changed our minds. And I say, while I'm not adverse to medical office buildings, and I don't usually take our job to be business analysts over, you know, what is really needed. It's more like what kind of uses you want in a particular area. You know, I think, you know, Mr. Kennelly made some good points, and as of now, 6 months down the road, I think I'll stick with my original denial. So I'm going to vote against it.
Commissioner Jacobson?
I was really torn with this decision. I know there needs something there, but basically nothing's changed since the last application if the deed restrictions don't count. And I did vote against it last time, and based on the comments of Commissioner Kennelly and Commissioner Barrett, I'm going to stick with that vote.
Okay. I think that's everyone. So, you know, I appreciated, I was most interested in hearing the legal on, you know, considering the application again in light of the prior application, because, you know, I was kind of struggling with it myself, and, you know, from a legal perspective, because, you know, frankly, I kind of, I was leaning towards changing my mind and wanted some comfort that I was able to do so. The change in circumstances in the neighborhood are that this is now a blighted property without any plan for anything, and the prospect for rejuvenation exists in our body to stimulate some change through you know, applications for a change in use, and that's what's before us. You know, I think the applicant was trying to send a message to us that, with respect to the deed restriction, about its intentions with regard to what I've called the back 40. And you know, I appreciate that. I understand that we can't consider that. We can't impose that as a condition of approval. But I do think that it is consistent with our plan of conservation and development in the sense that we are to promote, you know, medical facilities and such. I appreciate Commissioner Kennelly's comments that, you know, we have done so, but there is a need in the community for that. You know, the neighbors, another thing that Commissioner Kennelly said that struck me, and I'm not trying to single you out, but you remarked that there were some neighbors who were opposed to this. Everything that we got on this application from the neighbors was favorable, was in support. The only opposition we did hear was through Attorney Joel Green. I believe that there is a need for a zone change here, and I think that there has been a change in the neighborhood. I don't think that this corner, this area, is driven by that residential feel that you're referring to. You know, there is a portion here which is the design district, and this is an expansion of that, but it's not an outsized expansion of that, which is really kind of driving my decision here. I do think that, so with all of that having said, I think it's warranted, and I think it will serve the public health and safety. I think that the change will not just protect property values, but it's going to enhance property values in the community. I think that what's there now and what's been there is actually, you know, deleterious to the neighborhood and the community and property values. I'm satisfied with the traffic. As has been stated, I think really eloquently, you know, there is going to be an increase in traffic there regardless of what use you know, what change does occur, because right now the site's not generating any traffic, so whatever happens there is going to result in some increase in traffic. I don't believe that this is going to result in undue traffic congestion, and particularly in light of the changes that are going to be made on the street. So, you know, for all those reasons, I'm gonna support the motion to approve here. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Any discussion?
Just want to be clear, just real quick. So because of a blighted condition in a piece of property, we're going to convert a neighborhood design business district into a commercial district, which doesn't have to stay in a medical office building, but can built out to the level of whatever the commercial district for 2¼ acres can be. There's none of my colleagues see that there's anything short of that to deal with the blight condition at all. I mean, I know that, for example, when pizzerias have neon "we're open" signs, or when car washes run too many air pumps, oftentimes we ask our staff to intervene and do something rather than going ahead, and I know we don't set any precedents here, but set the precedent of converting a neighborhood design business district in a residential zone into a commercial zone. There's no one here thinks there's some other solution short of that. Just checking.
Well, part of this is a special permit process, and you know, what does ultimately get built in this new zone is subject to our review and discretion. And you know, I think that I'd like to think that we're competent to you know, to review those like we are. If we approve this, we would have the opportunity to, you know, pass on the proposal in the next item, the proposal for, you know, the medical office building. And it's been so long, to your, I guess, address your more pointed question, and there hasn't been any other change here. So, you know, what are you going to do?
I would suggest reject this and have the applicant come back with a more reasonable proposition, but I appreciate your indulgence. I'd only ask this, Mr. Chairman. Consider the thought experiment. What does this say to developers in town or owners of property who may now have property in neighborhood design business districts? If they let their properties go to seed, if they become ugly and unattractive, if they leave them for a long time and don't do anything with them, if they can arrange a white knight to come in and who just simply needs the predicate of a change of neighborhood design business district to commercial to build far larger, why wouldn't they do that? Especially since this commission has decided the answer to some PVC pipe and dirty old broken framing in an otherwise rural area is to allow a commercial zone change in a residential neighborhood, which, yes, there'll be a special permit, but when it's built out, could be 75,000 square foot of building. I don't see how that as a rationale is remotely sensible. What seems to me is that the applicant ought to come back to us with something much closer to what's reasonable. 14,000 square feet is the limited neighborhood design business district for office. This particular project is going to be 25,000 square feet, which was at the top end of what was even projected by the marketing person who presented a letter to us. His bottom number was 15,000. With just 1,000 square feet less, all that would have been needed here was an expansion of the existing neighborhood design business district. Instead, we're going to rush because there's no other choice. The answer would be a polite denial with an opportunity to engage. But I don't mean to belabor the point. It seems the minds have been made up. Thank you for your indulgence.
Anyone else? All right, we ready to vote? Motion on the table is to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. We have 3 nays, Commissioner Kennelly, Commissioner Barrett, and Commissioner Jacobson. The item carries 4-3. Next item on the agenda is 4185 Black Rock Turnpike, special permit application of New Way of Associates LLC pertaining to the construction of a medical office building. Period. Thought there was more on that one.
Again, very quickly, as you all know, the property is located on the south side of Black Rock Turnpike. The zone change property is approximately 2.5 acres, which you just approved. The plant factory proposal is to remove the existing plant factory structures and construct a single 2-story, 25,000 square foot office building. Based on our Section 25 regulations special permit, they do state that the Town Plan and Zoning Commission shall approve an application for special permit if it finds that the proposed use, proposed buildings, and structures conform to the applicable zoning regulations, and in this instance, it would be the design commercial district, and conform the applicable requirements and approvals of this section. Just other than that statement, there are 4 findings that are listed in that Section 25. One is that the use, you must find that the use is permitted in the zone. Number 2, they must find that specification for all driveway and off-street parking shall be subject to our Section 28 zoning regulations. That was outlined and reviewed with the commission at the meeting. The site plans indicate consistency with our Section 28 regulations, which are the configuration of the parking spaces and the access driveways internally. Number 3, the development shall, and this is it sounds very similar to what you've just reviewed and acted on as far as the zone change, but there is a section, Section 25, that states the development shall be of such character to harmonize with the neighborhood, to accomplish a transition in character between areas of unlike character, to protect property values, preserve and enhance the appearance and beauty of the community, and avoid undue traffic congestion. Again, very similar to the zone change requirements. And the last one basically has to do with landscaping, which you were presented with a landscaping plan at the public hearing, and basically that section states that you must find that all portions of the lot not used for building or other paved driveways, sidewalks, off-street parking and loading across shall be suitably landscaped. Mr. Chairman, is a brief overview what's proposed, and those are the findings in our Section 25 regulations.
Thank you.
The staff recommend any conditions of approval? If there are, I'm going to make a motion to approve. I don't know if you have any recommendations for conditions of approval.
It would be the standard conditions we have for any commercial development. There would be a bond required for all applicable site improvements, which would include the
No,
landscape.
I was just curious if you had anything outstanding that you thought during the course of the application.
No, I mean, based on what was submitted to you, our opinion, there is no zone waiver requirements for any part of this development. All the drainage and construction has been reviewed and approved as submitted at the hearing by our engineering department. Other than those 4 findings I just mentioned, which outline things like our Section 28 internal parking and access requirements and the landscaping requirements that were reviewed at the public hearing, and outlined to you and submitted to you as being consistent with those sections, we haven't heard or found any evidence that's not true.
The overhang was stated to be 13 feet.
13 feet clearance, yes.
And I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi, second by Commissioner Coleman. Okay. Anything you'd like to say? No? All right. Anyone else? Commissioner Barretts?
I have a question on one part of the application. First, I'd like to make a comment that we heard these applications together, and although we consider them separately, the reason for the approval, not that I voted to approve it, is to enable this particular project. So that's why we zoned that exact amount of land, was to enable this project. So my question is more for staff. It's something we talked about at the hearing. Can you explain what the rear property line is this? It was brought up at the hearing that you need a 50-foot setback from the rear property line. When I look at the map, it looks like, and I know you explained this at the first time, it looks like the back is there, and it looks like there's not enough setback, and you can't approve a special permit if it doesn't comply with our regulations. So, if you could, I know, and you explained it before, Mr. Went, it was 6 months ago, and I forgot, so please explain that.
That's okay. It's not a property line anymore, it's a zone line. So, but we do have a measurement from zone line. There's 2 things going on here. A rear property line is defined as any property line that's within either parallel with or within 45 degrees of parallel of the street line. That line is angled such that it's greater than 45 degrees, therefore it's a side yard, and they meet the 30-foot side yard.
That's why it's a side yard. Because it has to be from the zone line, so.
Correct.
I think it was explained, the rear property line is way back. It said,
Well,
no, when
it is.
they're rezoning.
It is. It got confusing this time. In the first, if you remember the first application, there was a proposed property line that was coincident with the zone line. So it was both a property line and a zone line. Now it's just a zone line, but it still is going to behave as if it's a property line because we also have a minimum setback from a residential zone line. So if that were to be a property line, it would be a side yard with respect to Black Rock Turnpike.
That's based on our definition of,
So you define that as the side yard. I just don't understand.
our regulations define it.
A rear yard is defined, a rear property line is defined as either being parallel to or within 45 degrees of parallel with the street line. If you project that property line down to Black Rock Turnpike, that angle is greater than 45 degrees. Therefore, it's not a rear property line.
Okay. I know it's not even, but what is the rear property line on this parcel that we're considering? Or is there one?
Well, with respect to the zone line itself,
Yes.
would be the piece,
Like, what does something have to be 50 feet from?
well, it doesn't necessarily have to be 50 feet. If there is a rear property line, it would be 50 feet, not all.
I think you're saying there is, yeah.
This line here
Mhm.
is roughly parallel
Yeah,
to Black Rock
okay.
Turnpike. They've got more than 50 feet.
Okay.
At this point, it's not within 45, they've got 30 feet.
Mhm.
And then again, as it returns back to parallel with Black Rock, they would have to hold 50 feet.
Okay, so in the points where it's parallel, it's 50 feet.
Correct.
In the points where it's more than 45, it's only 30 feet, but
Right.
our regulations regard that as a side.
Correct. If this were in fact a property line in a AAA zone, and someone were building a house, for example, the same setback would apply, 50 feet from here, 30 from here, and then 50 from there, depending on how that's laid out.
Because this is a commercial zone next to residential, the setbacks apply.
Correct.
It is the greater of the requirements. In this case, the AAA would prevail.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? I believe that all the reasons that, I expressed on the consideration of the zone change also apply here, so, I'm incorporating those in our findings with respect to the special permit. Are we ready to vote?
Well, I'd just like to go on the record saying that I oppose the permit application because I don't view it as being in harmony with this neighborhood. I also I do think that the expressed concerns related to traffic safety that were in the last judgment hold here absolutely with the curve with the hilly curve in the road and all the rest. So I don't think that the permit application approval is warranted.
Thank you. Anyone else? We ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
3 nays. Commissioner Kennelly, Barretts, and Jacobson. The item carries 4-3. Next item on the agenda is compliances. 26 Reef Road, application of Peter Romano to establish a food service retail use in an existing building in the Center Design District.
Okay. In your packet was some notes with respect to this site. If you're familiar with where the Firehouse Deli is, this is the property that's next door. It's a red building that for the last, I don't know how many years, it's been occupied as a real estate office. They're looking to establish a kind of a combination retail food service use here, Saugatuck Sweets, which is a combination candy and ice cream store. And when there is seating, we have treated ice cream as kind of like a food service use with respect to the parking calculation. This site shares its parking with the adjacent overall development for the former Fairfield department store. There's a parking structure there. And when you look at the overall parking, there is clearly a net increase in the demand for parking for this site by 17 spaces, but there are more than enough spaces within the overall development to accommodate that. So it's really a change in use from what has been a real estate office to a retail food service type establishment. The sign plan is going to be consistent with what was there before, just a painted wooden sign up on the front of the building.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
What is the sign? Motion to approve.
Sorry?
Motion to approve by Commissioner Kennelly, seconded by Commissioner Alessi. Go ahead, Commissioner Alessi.
What's the sign? Remember when, or the Saugatuck Sweet sign?
Well, that sign's in the window now. That's
Oh,
a
okay.
temporary sign. Yeah, their proposal is for the wooden sign above the door.
Okay. Yeah.
So, looks good. Anybody have any comments? Consistent with our regulations?
It is.
Anyone else? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is public hearing. We'll take 2 minutes, yes, to reconfigure, all right? We're adjourned, 2 minutes. Ready to go? All right. Call the meeting back to order. Next item is public hearing. First is 753 Tungus Hill Road, request of attorney Charles Janowski for 100% release of a $5,137.50 bond pertaining to subdivision improvements in a B zone.
Good evening. My name is Charles Jankowski. I practice law 134 Round Hill Road, Fairfield, and I represent 753 Tungus Hill LLC. This was a 2-lot subdivision, was approved in 2002, and my clients built 2 houses in 2002, got COs, and sold them in 2002. The only thing they forgot to do was ask for the bond release. So therefore, on behalf of my client, I would request that the bond be released.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
How much money is it?
$5,137.
Right. I have only one question. How'd they find it 13 years later?
There's a company that researches them.
Really? And they got a notice saying there's money being held on your behalf?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Somebody from, I think, Virginia or someplace like that. They research different towns and go through the
How much did
books.
they charge them to do?
Did they charge you a fee for the
No.
service?
No, but I do. Thank you.
Good enough. Hold on. Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard on this item? Going once, going twice? All right. I'll close the public hearing on this item. Next is 165 Butternut Lane, request of Walter Stapleton for 100% release of a $22,950 bond pertaining to subdivision improvements in a AA zone, two-lot subdivision for Ellen Siegel, approved 12507. Anyone? I'll call it again. Yes. Are you here on behalf of this applicant? Great. Sorry, it's might seem like a formal procedure, but the regulations require that there be a public hearing on any bond release. So we're required to mark it up, notice it, and then call the item and have you say,
Here I am.
I want the bond released. All the work is
I would
done.
love the bond release.
Yeah, identify yourself for the record, please.
My name is Chris Odell.
And what's your relationship to the
I
applicant?
represent the owners, Zero Butternut Lane LLC.
Great. And all the work is done?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you. Is there any member of the public that wishes to be heard on this? Going once, going twice? Okay, I'll close the public hearing on this item. Next is 411 Bronson Road, request of Paul Richter for 100% release of a $14,500 bond pertaining to subdivision improvements in an A zone, two-lot subdivision for Sharon Turner, approved 1/22/2013.
Paul Richter, I own the property at 411 Bronson Road. Half the improvements were completed and bond released previously. The rest of the improvements have been completed, and I believe there's a report from the engineering department in your file, so we request release of the remainder of the bond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? Going once, twice? I'll close the public hearing on this item. Next is 54 Sasco Hill Road, zone change application of Love Where You Live LLC to establish an A zone on land presently zoned design commercial district. Do we need a motion to call them at the same time and hear them together? Just call them both together? All right. So that's item number 4. Item number 5 is also 54 Sasco Hill Road, coastal site plan review application of Love Where You Live LLC pertaining to the construction of a single-family dwelling.
Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Raymond Rizzio with an office at One Post Road, Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm happy to be before you tonight with what I hoped was going to be a pretty straightforward application. If you'll recall, we were back before you a year or so ago with a very friendly neighborhood supporting our project, and everybody's very happy with the design of a beautiful commercial building, taking this converted home into a very nice, attractive, mixed-use building that was consistent with the regulations and without any variances. That had a few bumps in the road, and hence we've back before you tonight, having sensed how would you say, taken the temperature of the neighborhood, listened to everyone and decided, you know what, my client decided, look, everybody's worried about the traffic, everybody's worried about the use, everybody was worried about the density, everybody thought that this zoning of this property was a mistake, that how could this one piece of property be on Sasco Hill Road, and with a very small entryway, limited parking, all the other stuff, and even though it was consistent with the regulations, didn't seem to really fit. Hence, we're back, and we're back to change it to Residence A. That's what I thought. We'll see how it goes. But, so, this to me is I thought, probably a pretty simple application. And I thought it was a simple application because one of the things that your master plan talks about is trying to eliminate in these design business districts is any encroachment on the neighboring residency. Now, if you can see, by looking at the master plan, when we're looking at the zone map's very interesting, because the zone map shows everything, a good portion, once you get one lot back from the post road, the properties are zoned Residence A. Can you hear me? Okay. I normally hold the microphone, but since I'm Italian and talk with my hands, I can't do it all at once. So I apologize. So we have this little strip of property here. Very awkward. It was a home that was built in the 50s, then converted to an office, stays as an office, probably about 3,000 square feet. Property zoned DCD. Only entrance is from Sasco Hill Road. Sits consistently across the street. Every other property on the street going back from Sasco Hill is zoned residence. There is no entryway, there's no access from this house to or connection between this lot and the office building that's on the corner of Sasco Hill, which would be the southwest corner of Sasco Hill and the Post Road. So my client said, you know what? It really looks like a single-family home that's being used as one. Everybody in the neighborhood basically said they wanted it used as a single-family home. We don't believe it's going to depreciate values. We think it's consistent with the master plan. And there we go. Sorry. It's going to be like Comic Relief 1 tonight, but I apologize. So we think it's consistent with the master plan. Will not have any detrimental effect to values. Change in circumstances will be the whole traffic patterns that have changed from what used to be a quieter residential street, Sasco Hill Road, which has become a huge major cut-through, part of actually the whole commuter process when anything happens on I-95. So, given that, and I think when you know the piece, and if I take you through the chart between the two properties, one if it was zoned Residence A, and one if it's zoned DCD, which it's zoned now, I think you'll see that the thing that's consistent with the area, the thing that's consistent with the neighborhood is that this should really be zoned Residence A. So, everyone can do, let's just take it through the chart. So, if you look at this property at DCD, and just for your memory, forget about the architecture. We got the message. We're not looking for Southern California. We want colonial. The house is going to be what it is. But consistent with your regulations, without any variance, the need for a variance, like one single variance was the ability to put something like this here. And believe it or not, you could actually put almost twice the size of what this was here, consistent with the regulations. Problem really was parking, but you could park 11 cars. You can make it all fit. Mike Galante gave a great report that this was not going to affect traffic. It was I thought, a very good application. Maybe a little too progressive at the time, however you want to say it, but certainly different. So now we go back to Residence A, and we're looking at this little sliver of land. We're looking at a property that, if it was zoned design commercial district, this property satisfied all those regulations. And if you look at what we proposed at the time, we proposed a building that was going to be 7,000 square feet, no variances. You got to remember the difference in lot coverage. And remember, this is on the harbor. Because it's zoned DCD, you could have 75% lot coverage. 75% lot coverage as a part of floor area. The minimum, you could have maximum floor as a percentage of lot area is 60%. You could have 75% lot coverage total. You could have a building height of 40 feet, and you could go 4 floors. Other thing that you don't see of anything off Sasco Hill Road is you had setbacks of 0 and 10 feet in this district. So all of that stuff applies to this sliver of land. We were besieged at the hearing. We ended up withdrawing because we heard the neighborhood, and they said, this is not what belongs there. Even though our regs say you can have it, subject to a special permit, of course, and you could fit it, we're going to fight this to the death. So I call up Mr. Green and say, hey, look, we're going to come in Residence A. Is there going to be any problem? And he says, no, I'll get back to you, never heard back from him until this morning. So my client made the plans, we come in Residence A, and this is what we're talking about. So if you shift and turn the page to what we would be entitled to in Residence A. The lot area change, none of the lot constraints, we talked to Jim, talked to Joe, this is a pre-existing non-conforming lot as the frontage, whether it's DCD or it's Residence A, has nothing to do with the zone change. However, what are the differences? The differences are huge. The differences basically say you only have floor areas can only, instead of being 60%, or actually the floor area can be 150% of, in the DCD, the floor area can be 150% of lot area. Now, in Residence A, it can only be 40% of lot area. The maximum building lot coverage as a percentage of lot area could only be 20%. Under DCD, it could be 75%. The building height can only be 32 feet, and 2.5 stories versus 40 feet and 4 stories. And then the setbacks go from 7 foot on one side, 25 feet on the other, the difference between 0 and 10. So you take this sliver of land, you put the DCD, now the DCD was formed and applies to a lot of the smaller, it is okay where it works when it's in the commercial, in the so-called commercial strips. You need to go higher, you need some relief, we're not looking for landscape, we're not on the harbor, you know, all those kinds of good things in a DCD to spur the economy. Your regs talk about, we want connectivity, we want street lights, we want sidewalks, we want to encourage first floor uses to encourage traffic to take care of the retail, we want mixed use. All of that, and I know this commission would have said it, that's all I would have heard about. If I was making all those arguments during the special permit application, were very difficult to make apply to this site. There's no sidewalks, we don't have street lights, we don't want to turn this, there's no retail, we don't want to encourage traffic up and down off the Post Road onto Sasko Hill Road, or the in and out of retail traffic. So in looking at this application, you say to yourself, and the commission has the ability, this is your legislative authority. We drew the line years ago, the line happened to hit here. Typically, and it didn't even really run across lot lines because there's a piece of the neighbor's property that sticks in here. We tried to contact the neighbor, tried to see if he wanted to be part of this. We never heard back or got any confirmation that he would like to do that. So we can only control our piece. And typically, you're careful about zigzagging your lines. My gut instinct is when this was drawn as DCD, it was either an oversight or it was something to just try and match up with the use. Matching up with the use made sense until you applied it to the regulation that fit with the use. And then you take it to the next factor, which is being highlighted by coming out of Sandy when we have to make all these properties FEMA compliant. So now we go FEMA compliant. These things really, to be functional, to be marketable, need to be FEMA compliant, to be financeable. You go FEMA compliant, we go higher, we take down, and we apply the regs. Go higher, take down, apply the regs, 7,000 feet, 0 setback, 7 on another side, 11 parking spaces, 150% of floor area, of a floor area compared to lot area, 75% coverage. Doesn't really match up with one of the entry points to Sasko Hill Road, residential portion of the street, along with abutting the harbor. I don't know how much more I can say, except that I know you've all seen this parcel, you've all driven the street, you all know I've highlighted the regulations, I've highlighted your plan of conservation and development, and I don't know how Mr. Green is going to say with a straight face that this should now be commercial, but I'm assuming we will hear shortly. This property should be residential, single-family home works, single-family home is something that would reduce traffic, reduce curb cuts, reduce intensity on the site, reduce the number of cars that come on and off the property, preserve the maximum amount of green space, provide the best look, most consistent with the neighborhood which it exists. This is not a post-road property. So when you say, is it consistent with the neighborhood, I don't think anybody would say, once you get one lot off Post Road, that portion of Sasko Hill is an extension of the Post Road. It's not. Once you get off entryways to Post Road, it takes on a whole residential character.
Now, when you get a moment, we have a question.
Yes.
Commissioner Barrett.
Yeah, I just didn't want to... I didn't want to interrupt your flow, Mr. Rizzi. I just have one question. I do understand about the unique shape of this lot and its unique location, so, just looking at the grid, if you could just explain to me, because I know our regs, I don't always, know how we're, how certain things apply to them. So, when you have the new grid for the residential, one of the things we did a couple of years ago is we changed the minimum lot frontage to equal the square, so that's 75 feet. So this lot exists with a 52-foot frontage.
Correct.
So that does not really comply with our current regulations. So, could you,
Well, Jim and I had that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is, remember, you're drawing a zone line. You're not, and the idea is to not create further nonconformities, or create a nonconforming lot.
Mm-hmm.
In this instance, the lot's going to be nonconforming whether it's DCD or it's RA. We can't get it, we have a 50-foot square, our minimum lot frontage is supposed to be 75 feet, we only have 52 feet. So we'll never comply with lot frontage.
Well, I'm sorry, but the lot frontage in commercial is only 30 feet, so it does comply with the commercial. Other things may not comply with the commercial, but that particular dimension...
Correct, but that
does comply with commercial and doesn't
with
residential.
But in the end, for example, you got to remember, you're now drawing lines.
Mm-hmm.
You have the right legislatively to draw the lines where you like, irrelevant to that particular lot, except zone the best you see fit.
Okay.
In this instance, you have the right to draw the, for example, you go to redo your zoning map. You can move that line wherever you want if you feel that it's justified based on the neighborhood. And then the client ends up with, how do they deal with the nonconformity? The lot's not going to change. We believe it's nonconforming, whether it would be DCD or RA, and even if it isn't, you have the right legislatively to say, I still don't think DCD is the appropriate zone for that site. For example, there's pieces that you zone residential that'll never be conforming, and probably could actually meet commercial, which is a lot more stringent. But you in your discretion have the right to draw that line where it's most appropriate, where it doesn't destroy property values, where it's consistent with the neighborhood and consistent with the master plan. I think it's a whole different, if I was coming here for a subdivision and looking for variances, we got a whole different discussion going on. When we're talking about you and your legislative, this is no different than doing a text amendment. This is no different, you're changing your map, you're acting in your legislative capacity and saying, what do I feel is right for this piece? And I'm just trying to give you all the ammunition that you can, that's saying the ability to donate, the ability to develop this property under DCD is not as appropriate for the site, the location, the neighborhood, as it would be if we're zone residence A. Now, in a zone change, and I believe the commission agreed to hear the coastal and the zone change application at the same time?
Yeah, and
All right.
I called them together. I mean,
So-
just, your entire presentation
One
would
of
be
the
great.
things that's appropriate is, then, as we move on to the coastal part of the application, is the type of property, the type of development that would be consistent there. In the coastal property, we're going to raise the elevation to 18 feet. We plan on building a property that's colonial in nature. We have submitted, Bill Kenny has prepared our coastal report. There is no negative impact on the coastal area that he has found. We have revised and re-revised our plans and given to Jim Went, and who was presented to Laura Pulley, who has now reviewed all the drainage, all the retention on the property, and the last plan that she saw today, I believe, Jim, I have a copy of the letter that she sent out today that says the property is consistent and all her concerns have been addressed. So in the coastal plan, what we're trying to do is do what we can to protect all the natural resources of the harbor. The fact that we no longer we have a driveway with a parking lot into a 2-car parking garage versus 75% of the lot being covered with asphalt, and the ability to cover the property with commercial parking certainly helps limit the effect that we could ever have on any of the coastal resources. The building itself, I'll just give you a look at the elevations, is very colonial in nature.
Before you get to the
2.5 stories, yes.
Before you get to the next part, I think, and I just was reminded by looking at the plan here, is there a part of the existing driveway that's used by the adjoining neighbor?
Yes.
Is there a share?
Right, they have an access point that they share.
Any issues with that? I mean, is it just going to stay the same as it is?
There is nothing, here's the only thing that this hearing is about tonight, is we believe for this commission to focus on a particular piece of property with the ability that the consensus of the general neighborhood at the time was that it's zoned incorrectly, with the consensus that I kind of got from this commission that they were a little uncomfortable with the possible growth and a redevelopment of this property and its consistency with the neighborhood, and that is the appropriate zone, Residence A or DCD, whether something gets built there or not. To me, it would seem that the relevant, from what I've heard from the public, from what I heard from this commission when I was going through my presentation, is that this certainly seemed much more appropriate for DCD. I mean, for Residence A. The problem with this is the property, some neighbors I think are just going to say they want to keep it where it is. They want to keep what's there. They don't want anything to change. Our goal is to make all these properties FEMA compliant. The current property is not FEMA compliant. We want this to be able to be rebuilt, repurposed, and reused. If it's going to be rebuilt, repurposed, and reused, do you believe this property, which is pre-existing non-conforming, which is on the entryway to a major residential property in town, that should it be a single-family residence, we don't have to worry about deed restrictions or any of that stuff, because there's only one thing you allow in your Residence A, pretty much without a special exception, is a single-family home. So nobody's doing anything but a single-family home without coming back before this commission. Or do we allow, and I made a copy, but I think this commission could take notice of the myriad of uses that come with the DCD that all lead to more traffic, greater parking, more use of the property.
Right.
And that's really the application.
Yeah, I was just asking about the existing shared driveway, to make sure that
Nothing's going to change.
If there was
They
any
share
impact on the
They
neighbor.
share the driveway now. The only thing that I would assume, and that's what is perplexing to me, is that I would think the use of the driveway by a single-family home and sharing with the user of a single-family home versus the sharing it with a commercial establishment will certainly lessen any impact on the neighboring property.
Well, and that I appreciate that. It's kind of what I was driving at. You might have mentioned it before. Have you talked to the adjoining landowner?
We attempted to contact the adjoining owner, asked them if they wanted to be Chris Russo in my office. We tried to contact him numerous times and asking if and we never got the approval to join our application, because one of the things Jim Went asked us was we would like to have the zone lines be consistent and try to get the whole property zoned Residence A if we're going to make the application. We don't control the property owner. In fact, I find it hard to believe that the property owner is going to be here actually opposing this application tonight.
Okay, but you don't have an indication one way or the other from the adjoining property owner?
Well, I think you will in about 5 minutes.
Okay, all right, very good. So to that end,
That's my presentation. For all those reasons, we believe that this property should be zoned Residence A, We thought we certainly tried to address all the concerns of the neighborhood, the concerns of this commission.
Right.
I think it'd be pretty hard to say with a straight face that this property is better served as a commercial establishment developed in full accordance with your regulations than it would be a single-family home. We believe it serves to protect the environment, protect the neighborhood, protect values, and we believe that we presented a coastal application that has no impact on any resources of Long Island Sound or any coastal resources. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? No? All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any member of the public wish to be heard?
Good evening. I want to apologize. My public speaking is probably my worst quality, so my voice starts to crack, just my normal tendency, so.
I'm sure you think you're a lot worse than you really are.
Well, thank you. I am the neighbor adjacent to this particular property. I own parcel B of this subdivision that occurred, I think, roughly in about 1985. I am opposed.
Can you just state your name?
My name's Steve Susick, it's S-U-C-I-C. I own 56 Sasko Hill Road.
Thank you.
I have my particular property's zoned residential A, and roughly about 10% or a little bit less is zoned commercial, same as the adjoining property, parcel A. Okay, I am opposed to changing my zoning of that little 10% or so to being residential A. The reason for is I believe it adds value because I am in a neighboring commercial area. If things change in the future, I have a section of it that's commercial. I'd like to keep it that way. Okay, that's my position on that. On a particular property, whether it goes residential A or maintains commercial, I think right now I have to oppose this because the plans that I see are preliminary plans. I do not know what the setbacks are. I don't know what the size of the property is going to be, or the home or the dwelling. So with that data, I would have to oppose this particular, proposal, this current change to residential A until I see the final prints of that property that they're going to build on that, or the dwelling they're going to build on that property. Because I know the setbacks right now are, 7 on one side, 18 on the other side for, residential A. If that happens, he's roughly got a 25, width-wise piece of property, which I think is very small. So until I see the actual dimensions, where the property's going to be located, or the dwelling's going to be located.
Yeah. Meaning, I'm sorry, normally we don't ask questions of members of the public, is the way that we normally would do in a, with a council. But you're the immediately adjoining, landowner.
Yep.
It's unclear to me, so the proposed zone change, you believe, would also rezone a 10% portion of your property from DCD to residential?
I believe so.
Yeah, so, and that's why I raised it with you, because as you were talking, I was getting confused, because it doesn't appear that way to me on the proposed map that's here in the application. It appears to me that the hatched portion here of the site is what is being proposed. Okay? Am I
No, you're
I can ask staff.
The proposed southerly boundary of the Residence A is coincident with the applicant's property line. It does not change the zone of the adjoining property line.
Thank you. I thought that was important to clarify. Does that change
that's
your
fine.
position?
No.
No.
I mean, if my property maintains to be commercial, that little swath of it, that's fine. That's what I would like to see.
I don't, that's,
Commercial though.
Huh?
No, if you,
I mean, I'm not, what is,
he's got that map right there.
Jim went for the record. I'm looking at the zone change map. Parcel 433 on the zone change map is the subject parcel.
Right.
Mr. Susick
correct.
owns parcel 433A, a portion of which is presently zoned commercial. It's the little island
compound.
that would remain. when the application was originally offered, we suggested to the applicant that they do some outreach to see if this property owner would be amenable to the zone change. Obviously, that is not his interest to do so. He wants to keep it, that portion remain. The application before you does not propose to change the southerly property line.
I see.
So
And
there will be remaining, there will be a remaining little island of DCD that's owned by Mr. Susi.
I see.
Is everybody good on the map?
I think we understand.
Okay, sorry for that confusion. So, but again, back to the driveway use, currently have the right-of-way to both the garage and the parking space, which is further west, that typically is not included in any maps that I see of the proposed improvements to the property. So, you know, I need to see that also on the final design, which gives me access to my second parking location, which is paved currently. And what I don't see on the particular proposed map is a location where I can back up in order, I don't have to back into Sasko Hill Road, I can go out forward. So those are some of the things
That you're able to do that now?
What's that?
You're able to do that now?
Yes, I am. Yep. It's currently paved, you know, it's marked, this was done, you know, the pavement's, I would say definitely 20 years plus old. So it's been in existence prior to my ownership.
Right. And if you can or don't want to answer this question, please feel free to say, you know, I'd rather not. Is there a particular reason why you would prefer to have a small sliver of your property zoned DCD when you have a residential house on it?
Yeah, I think, I don't know what the future holds. If I have a variety of a zoning, I prefer that. I mean, right now, it's no hindrance to me to have a little swath of commercial zoning, right? I am right next to, adjacent to, commercial property, so that's never gonna change. So I might as well have a section of it, and in the future, laws might change, that might offer me some benefit. Right now, it does not offer me any hindrance. The other thing with the property line, majority, there's a sewer access that runs primarily underneath my property, just hits their property a little smidgen, then it cuts across, going south towards the sound as well. So again, until I see the final design, I'm currently opposed. I want this commission to finalize the setbacks for the property, the location of the new dwelling, if it's going to be A zoning. I'd like to see the detailed, you know, build plans for this dwelling before I can be on board and, you know, be in favor of this particular change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to be heard?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff, my name is Joel Green. I live in Fairfield. I practice law in Bridgeport, the law offices of Green and Gross. I was struck by...
Are you here in personal capacity, or are you representing someone?
Well, I was going to get to that, but I represent Sasko Associates, the owners of the property at 10 Sasko Hill Road, which is the property on the corner of Sasko Hill and Post Road. It's an office building, which I'm sure you've all seen. It's on the corner opposite, across from Exide, and opposite the building that is now One Sasko, that I know you're all well familiar with. I was struck by Attorney Rizzio's initial comment that he called me to inquire about a residential use of the property, and that is true. He called me some time ago and said, how would the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association feel about a residential use of this property? And I said to him, well, I will make a call and I will get back to you. And he is correct that I didn't call him back. I called Sasko Hill, the Neighborhood Association, and spoke to the board at some point. And their response was that They are not against a residential use of the property, but based on what had happened in the past and the design that had been submitted by this applicant previously, they wanted to see what was being proposed and what it looked like. I then composed an email, and I sent it to Attorney Rizzio, and he responded, and I did indicate that they were not opposed to a residential use of the property, but once again, the devil is in the details, and they wanted to see that. Tonight, however, I appear on behalf of an abutter,
Okay.
which is...
So that's the end of the story as far as the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association?
Well, the Sasko Neighborhood Association hasn't seen a final plan for residents either, so they have not taken a position on this application.
Okay, very good, thank you.
A little bit about the history. First of all, Attorney Rizzio said, we heard what the neighborhood wanted in terms of a residential use of the property. Well, I think what Attorney Rizzio actually heard during the evening of the last presentation was that the office building, besides being, I don't know how to characterize this, but there seemed to be a lot of disagreement as to the characterization about it being an attractive office building, and I think many people thought it was out of character for the neighborhood. But more significantly, I had pointed out to the commission in my presentation that the proposed office building could not be built because it didn't meet your standards for special permit. I had prepared and I have with me tonight from that last application, this red card represents 1/2. This is at a 10 scale, it's 75 feet by 37.5 feet. As you know, the minimum square in the zone that exists was 75 feet. This commission has our zoning regulations have a requirement that any portion of a lot that is less than half of the minimum square cannot count towards lot area. In calculating lot area, I had pointed out to the commission, and I will point out again this evening, and this drawing is a 10 scale, and the applicant shows on this drawing that the total area of the lot is 12,430 square feet. There's area below the 1-year title line that is netted out of 644 square feet. So the applicant shows a total net area of 11,786 square feet. However, when you take half of the minimum square of the lot, you'll find that this entire portion of the lot from approximately here towards Sasko Hill Road cannot count towards lot area. Therefore, I calculate the actual usable lot area of somewhere between 7,500 and 8,000 feet, and not nearly 12,000 feet. I pointed that out to the commission when I last appeared, and therefore the proposed office building that had been, or the office building that had been proposed was, well, the plans grossly misstated, the grid grossly misstated the various components of meeting a special permit. In terms of...
So that was that application?
That was that application.
Which was withdrawn?
Correct.
And no decision was rendered, regardless of how we indicated, or seemed to insinuate...
trouble.
Okay. So, can you explain just link it up, the relevance of your argument with respect to this application?
Yes. What's happening now is first of all, just a brief history. Attorney Rizzio said, we want to change it back to Residence A. This was never Residence A. This was a B1 zone, and it was, for a long time, it was a B1 zone prior to the 80s when it was changed to design commercial at the time that the design district regulations were adopted. And in fact, this lot was a single lot, and the premises at 56 Sasko Hill Road and premises at 54 were a single lot. There was, I believe, a doctor who was a chiropractor who owned both parcels, Parcel A and Parcel B. I actually have a drawing. I'll submit this just for the commission to see. Significantly, in order to assist Attorney Rizzio and Mr. Sousa's Susick. I had taken this drawing, and I just wanted to illustrate the sliver of Mr. Susick's property that remains, that is not the subject of this application. So let me hand this to the commission. You'll see how the division went between a parcel A and a parcel B. And what happened was, at the time, there were two residences on the property. The property was split between originally a B1 zone, or between a B1 zone and an A zone. And what happened was, he proposed to take the one residence on the house and create a doctor's office. There was a variance granted by the town, and the variance said that it was conditioned on the applicant residing in one house on the property and the other house being used as an office. And then the other condition was that any residential use of the premises situated in the business zone had to be abandoned. So an original condition of the variance that was granted was that the residential use of 54 Sasko Hill Road had to be specifically abandoned. On that basis, an office was allowed to be built on that property. That office still exists today. The office was slightly expanded by 350 feet or something later in the 80s. And since that time, the properties were sold to separate owners. The ownership went into two parties, and now is owned by, I think it's 54 Sasko LLC, and Mr. Susick are the two owners of the properties. Attorney Rizzio's client is apparently a contract purchaser who proposes to develop the property for profit. So why shouldn't you make this a residential zone property? Well, first of all, you are increasing the nonconformity of the property. I thought it was interesting that in the CAM application, in the statement of use in the CAM application, it says, the proposed plan will require no variances in a residential A zone. Well, we know that's not true. First of all, we know that it does not meet the minimum square. We know that with the reduction of that portion of the property that's less than 37.5 feet wide, it doesn't meet the minimum lot area. We know it does not meet minimum frontage. We know it is non-conforming in four different ways. It is non-conforming, and there is no way that the use of that property, based on your zoning regulations, the use or the buildings cannot be expanded because they are presently non-conforming. So there can be no change of use, and there can be no change in the size of the structures on the property at present, based on the zoning regulations as they're presently written. Yes?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
A couple of months ago, you didn't want a commercial building to go here. I remember Jack Franzen coming and saying he didn't want to look at this from his office, and the Sasko Hill residents were totally against this being a commercial building. And now you're telling us not to make it a residence property, and the Sasko Hill residents are fine with that. I mean, fine with it being a residence, changing it to you take no position. So let's say this commission now says, okay, we're going to keep it DCD, and 6 months later or a year later we come back with a commercial property, and then Sasko Hill residents are going to go back and forth and come back again and say, well, we want to keep it a residence, it's Sasko Hill, it's a historic road, and we are going to be looking at it from the bridge, and are we going to just keep playing ping pong back and forth with this property?
Well, that's a great question, and I have two answers.
Okay.
First of all, the property, as I indicated, is really non-conforming with Residence A. I mean, you would be creating a grossly non-conforming lot suddenly in a Residence A zone. Also, I note that having Mr. Susick's property and not, having kind of that split and leaving a small sliver of DCD there is probably a little bit troubling to the commission as well. So, first of all, so it also does not conform, but to a lesser degree, so it's less non-conforming in a DCD zone, okay? So it'll be more non-conforming if you convert it to Residence A, and it would be less non-conforming if it stays in a DCD. So therefore, based on the zoning regulations, right at the moment, the property is used as a small office. And based on the zoning regulations, that use cannot change. It cannot be expanded. The building cannot be expanded. The use cannot change because it is presently non-conforming. And you'll bear with me for one moment. Section 2 point. Section 2.8 says, any use of land, buildings, or structures legally existing on the effective date of the zoning regulations or any amendment thereto, which use does not conform to one or more provisions of the zoning regulations, may be continued. So you can continue a non-conforming use that exists. And so this property, it doesn't conform with so many of the zoning regulations, but its use as it presently exists can continue. But 2.8.1 says, no non-conforming use of land, building, or any other structure shall be enlarged or extended to include any other building, land, or other structure or part thereof which is not subject to the nonconformity, or shall be changed to another use unless such use is substantially a conforming use. So right at the moment, I think no one is dissatisfied with this office that exists. It's a small business office. It's not high traffic. It's quiet. It's a small building, and no one is bothered by it. And based on the existing nonconformity, that can't change. It'll always be an office. It'll always be in that small building. I suppose the only change could be if it has to be raised due to FEMA, then perhaps the first floor elevation could be changed. Now,
And before you go on.
And then at that point,
Yeah.
we're
So,
gonna have Sasko Hill residents back saying, this is an ugly.
well, that would be a matter for the Zoning Board of Appeals, and a hardship, under
Right.
certain circumstances, a FEMA regulation is recognized as a hardship. But you can't change the footprint, you can't add a second story, and so forth.
But isn't that what we're facing now, basically as a residential, is we have to raise this house due to FEMA as well too, where it is?
Well, no, that's not part of this application.
Well, he says he's raising it because of the river. Because of the water, mill pond behind him is why he's raising it to become FEMA compliant.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Isn't he raising his property to be FEMA compliant?
it's,
Yes, the proposal is to have a structure that would be FEMA.
Yeah, so, but there's no, at the present time, there's no justification to raise it necessarily. That's part of this application.
Right, I
This is
mean-
strictly zone change.
I think, well, there's a zone change application, and then there's the application for the special permit to build the proposed structure. The proposed structure is to be raised and
There's-
FEMA compliant.
There's no special permit application pending this evening. It's strictly a zone change and a coastal,
A coastal site plan,
coastal
forgive me.
site plan
forgive me.
review.
Yeah, you're right, forgive me.
So-
The-
okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
So let me get to the second point. My client at 10 Sasko Hill, Sasko Associates, says that, now I know that they can't build this house because of the limitation of the floor area, so the proposal that's before you can't be built anyway because it exceeds coverage, it exceeds total floor area, and there's some other issues in terms of its compliance. So that house isn't going to be built. And interestingly, the elevations that are shown and the dimensions are, this grid is not accurate either in terms of the house that can be built. But the office building at 10 Sasko is now confronted with the notion of having this gigantic house pegged up right against it. And so obviously they're not happy with that. But more significantly, due to your regulation that we've discussed on a number of occasions before, it changes their property as well, because Section 12.7.6.4, instead of having a property line between 10 Sasko and 54 Sasko Hill Road, they now have a zone line. And Section 12.7.6.4 of your regulation says, where you have an adjacent residence district boundary, the setback shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district setback requirement, whichever is greater. So that impacts directly on the development or redevelopment of 10 Sasko Hill. So to answer Commissioner Alessi's question, that's why 10 Sasko Hill says, hey, wait a second.
Yeah,
That's
no,
right.
and thank you for getting
I'm
there.
sorry I took the long route,
I
but
appreciate that. So the proposed zone line is, I mean, actually on the map that's here, it looks like it is immediately adjacent to the edge of the building.
correct.
Does the building sit on the property line?
It doesn't, as far as I can tell, but I haven't seen it's very close, and I spoke to the manager of the LLC who told me the building is very
So-
close to the property.
So, what does it change the setbacks to?
Well, I did a comparison, and frankly, I was retained this morning, and I did call, I'm sorry, Mr. Wendt, did you want to?
Well, we'll have a point of clarification. I mean, I would like to understand what the,
The street line setback in a Residence A is 30 feet, but on a corner lot, one of them, street line setbacks can be 22. In a design commercial district, the street line setback's 25. The side yard setback is 7, or a total of 25 in a Residence A. In a DCD, it's 0 and 10.
right?
And the rear setback, which either the sideline setback or the rear line setback might come into play. The rear line setback in a Residence A is 30, and in the DCD, it's 10. So that could potentially impact the future development of my client's property. However, my client's property is currently a corner lot, I suppose, as well. So the point is, it does impact potentially the development of the property. I don't know, and I noticed on the site plan that it does show an outline of the building of 10 Sasko. My client's not sure that that is accurate in terms of the location of his building, and he questioned that, but I didn't have a chance to go look at his plans and measure that, but that is a concern.
So it's your argument that granting the zone change will create a pre-existing non-conforming setback at 10 Sasko Hill?
I don't know if it will render 10 Sasko Hill non-conforming or not. I can't make that representation.
Okay.
But I can tell you that the potential development of 10 Sasko Hill from the potential that exists right now to what would exist if you were to put the zone line on the boundary line between 10 and 54, it would impact the development potential of 10 Sasko.
So there's two arguments.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Mr.
I
Chairman.
just want to put a real
Right.
fine point on it. And the way that it would be impacted is that there would be a greater setback?
There could
Because
be,
you're next to a residential?
because
Right.
of that
residential
adjacent
neighbor.
residence district boundary,
I understand.
yes.
And what would the difference in the setback be?
20 feet,
Well,
10 to 30?
it depends. Right at the moment, the sideline setback in a DCD is 0 on one side and 10 feet on the other, whereas in a Residence A, it's 7 and 25. So depending on whether that is characterized as a side yard setback or a rear, and in the case of a rear street line rear setback, it's 30 feet in a Residence A, and it's 10 feet in a DCD.
Right.
So it impacts the development potential of 10 Sasko, and I suppose the value of the property on some basis.
So I'm clear, the competitive concern that we have to weigh is the one you've just raised. That is the impact to your client of no longer having a commercial neighbor, but rather a residential neighbor where we make this.
Correct.
The larger point you seem to be making that Mr. Rizzo has to address is whether or not we're going to create an even greater existing nonconformity by then making this a residential property
Right.
than it would be as a commercial property.
it
In other
is-
words, your
yes.
broader public concern that we have to consider
Yes.
is that.
Correct.
Right? And Mr. Rizzo, I guess we'll have to address that in rebuttal. Okay.
And the only justification, by the way, in the statement in the narrative was, the justification seemed to say, well, it says, if you look at the zone map narrative, it says, in said plan, this is the plan of conservation and development, in said plan, under recommended development policies for Southport, it says the area in which the subject premises lies. Now, let's be clear. The Center District and Southport, the dividing line is Sasko Hill Road there. So this property is literally the eastern boundary of the Sasko neighborhood as it's defined in the plan of conservation and development. And across the street is the center of town. So literally Sasko Hill Road is the dividing line. It states that the encroachment of commercial uses into residential zones should be discouraged. Well, it's not encroaching. I mean, it exists. So it's not that you were being asked, as you were up at the plant factory, to not allow further encroachment into residential. Right at the moment, it exists. So no one is suggesting that it's encroaching. So they're seeking to reduce that. And it says the intent of said plan is for properties along the Post Road corridor with access to the Post Road in this area of Southport to be zone DCD. Now, I didn't see that anywhere in the plan of conservation and development. Contrary to this intent, the subject premises has no access onto the Post Road, and therefore its current zoning represents an encroachment of a commercial zone into a residential area. Well, let me say this. First of all, 10 Sasko Hill also has access only on Sasko Hill Road. First of all, my client's property as well. But there are properties all over Southport that don't access on the Post Road. So I think that the applicant got a little generous with their interpretation of the plan of conservation and development that way. And I can think of dozens and dozens and dozens of properties in Southport that don't access commercial uses that don't access the Post Road and access in residential zones. So I don't think that's a legitimate basis for the proposed zone change. So I just wanted to address that briefly. I think you'll find that really it doesn't meet any of the standards, and I know you spent a considerable amount of time on that tonight with the plant factory on the standards for a zone change. And I don't think that this proposed zone change meets any standards, and once again, you are increasing the non-conforming characteristics of this property. I think that I've spent a lot of time before the ZBA and on appeals involving variances, and I don't think that there could be any justification outside of potentially the FEMA lift that we've talked about for a variance, because there is a valid use of the property. The property has value. It does have an existing non-conforming use. There's no economic loss. There's no confiscation by virtue of the imposition of the zoning regulations. So no hardship exists, and any reduction in non-conformity would just make the building smaller at this point. So I think the answer is the neighbors, while they would be, and I don't want to speak for the neighbors, I think they would be supportive of a modest residential use of the property, potentially. This is not that, but I think more than that, I think the neighbors would like to see the property stay as it is, and under the current zoning configuration, all indications are that it would stay as it is, and I don't think that anyone has justified a need for a change from this low-impact office use that exists, that I think everyone is satisfied with, and I think you'll hear from several of the neighbors, and I think you'll hear from other neighbors on other sides of this property, all of which who are basically content with the status quo and would urge the commission not to exercise your, legislative power, because it's just, there's no need for it. I don't know if you have any other questions for me. That's all I've got.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Attorney Green? No? Great.
Can I just take one moment? I don't think I'll appear again before the commission before the end of the term. For those of you who are leaving the commission, I personally want to thank you for your patience with me and all the time and effort that you've put in with good spirit. To those of you who are running for re-election, I wish you the best, and it's been a great term, and I think just in general, I don't think anyone understands the amount of time and effort and thought that you all put in. I, having spent a considerable amount of time before you, and probably, well, I don't even want to, I mean, had you scratching your heads many times, I just want to thank you for all of your efforts and wish you all the best.
Thank you, that was very nice of you, I appreciate that.
I have a couple questions for staff, if I could.
Yes. Let me just, are we finished with Attorney Green? I think we
You may
are.
want to respond, but
Okay, thank you.
I would,
And I would like for you to
I would
address
like the
the issue of the
opportunity to
setback.
address a couple things that Attorney Green said before we close the hearings, to the extent that he wishes to
Come back?
address what I have to say, so
Well,
that's-
So, thank you, Attorney Green, okay?
Well, I was just asking to find out about some of these
Yeah,
things related to that. Like, how did you develop this horrible, even worse nonconformity is what I guess I'm getting at. Is that what, how did you, that's what, yeah.
That's where we're going.
Okay, great.
And if you have questions, you can...
This is a first, but I'm not gonna go there.
Just,
You can make a property...
State your name for the record.
I'm sorry, Jim Wendt, for the record, your Assistant Planning Director. In your legislative capacity, you can make properties non-conforming. You do it quite often, not often. When this commission approved the increase in frontage from 20 feet to whatever the lot square width was in the particular zone, you made hundreds of properties non-conforming when that regulation was adopted. If you believe that it's in the best interest of the town to make a change, and the result of that results in a property becoming non-conforming or more non-conforming than it already is, you have the discretion to do that. So the fact, he's correct, I agree with Mr. Green, that if this zone change is approved, this lot becomes more non-conforming than it already is. We agree on that.
The subject lot, right?
Correct,
We're talking
but you
about
have the right to make that decision. If you agree that the zone change to residential is a better fit in the long term for this property, you have the right to make it more non-conforming. I think that's what, we had that academic discussion. It's already non-conforming with regard to lot square. The lot square in the DCD is the same as that in Zone A, so that doesn't make it more non-conforming. However, the frontage, as Commissioner Barrett's point out, does increase from 30 feet to 75 feet. If you think that the residential use is appropriate, you have the right to make it non-conforming. You did, and when you adopted that regulation, you made many lots non-conforming. The existing use as commercial is not a non-conforming use. It's a conforming use. It may be a non-conforming structure, but it can expand. The prior application that you saw was to completely demolish what was there and build what was proposed to be a conforming structure. So there can be an expansion of that commercial use if it remains commercial. It's not frozen in time, locked at the size that it is now. It can be expanded to the extent that that expansion complies with the zoning regulations.
I think his point was that
Perhaps
the
it couldn't have been as big as it was proposed to
Right.
be,
The
but it
application
can
of
be
those
bigger than
zoning-
it is presently.
the application, I think his point is the application of zoning regulations would severely limit the ability of anything to be much larger, if at all larger,
Well,
than what it is today.
That notwithstanding, the fact of the matter is, if you know, the coverage and floor area calculation notwithstanding, it's not frozen there. With respect to the setback issue, in my opinion, the commercial setback on that side is not implicated by the change in zone. It is the greater of either 7 feet, which is the adjoining side yard setback, or 10 feet, whichever is greater, so that would still remain 10 feet to the extent that it is a side yard. 10 Sasko Hill is is a corner lot, so they have a choice as to whether to call that adjoining property line a side or a rear. It would be to their advantage to call it a side yard, and in that case...
They get to choose?
Yes, yes. And it would not increase from 10 feet. It's presently 10 feet. It would stay 10 feet as a side yard. So
Okay,
that's-
very good.
I
Mr.
don't know if
Kelly?
I don't know if that addressed Mr. Kennelly's question. I thought, okay.
Okay.
All right.
That's all? Does anyone else have any questions? Mr. Wayne? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
May I just address those remarks?
You may.
I think that many of Mr. Wendt's points are well taken. However, when you created, for example, when you required that the square be on the street, you did so in response to a larger public need planning, a larger planning function that you had determined. And I would suggest that in this instance, there is no larger community need that would justify a zone change. And so I think, yes, and when you made that change, when you, for example, and I'm citing that particular one, but all the time, you weigh the effect on existing properties in the zone throughout town.
I think that those are two independent considerations, right? One is the need and the impact and so forth, and the other is the creation of existing nonconformities. And I think that your arguments were, you know, you made those arguments, both of them, discreetly, and
Yes.
one of them, I think, is that it would create not a nonconformity, and I don't think there's any dispute.
And I think that Mr. Wendt, and I'm not sure whether he disagrees with me or not, but right at the moment, you have a non-conforming lot with a structure on it that is non-conforming. So the use, he is correct, is commercial, and it's in a commercial zone. He is correct. However, due to the non-conformity of the lot, in other words, he's correct that in a commercial zone, it also requires a 75-foot square, that the structure then, I would suggest on the non-conforming lot, I would say cannot be expanded due to the non-conformity of the lot.
That's actually one other question I had, but I don't know whether it's appropriate now or later, but it was whether that square needs to be excluded from the calculations due to the neck on the lot.
No, I agree with that. I disagree with the previous statement, though.
Got it.
So, again, it's not, I don't particularly think that's relevant to this particular application. I agree that there may need to be an adjustment made to the lot coverage and the total floor area for a potential house to be built on this lot, but you're not asked to be
We're not doing
in
that
judgment
today.
in that.
Right, exactly, okay.
And just as a note, there's also an easement over the property for access to Lot
56.
A, and that would have had to be, that's not netted out, and the parking area is not netted out, and under your definition of lot area, that would also not be
So
counted.
those calculations need to be refined.
Correct.
Right, okay. Commissioner Barrett?
I could ask you, because I think you understand, what Mr. Wendt just said was that what they call the lot area of 11,000, Mr. Green is right in his assertion that something would have to be netted out of that 11,086 to calculate the lot area. You agree with that? And it would probably be less than 9375.
Yes, but it already is.
Okay. I'm just adding up, like, how many nonconformities we have on this in terms of the zoning grid when we say, you know, and I understand we have the right to do it, I'm just trying to understand what exactly would be nonconforming to our existing regulations, should we grant the zone change, and that seems to be another.
I agree that there's a portion of the lot that would need to be netted out for the total lot area, but that impact does not impact its nonconformity because the present regulation would require to do that in its existing commercial state because the lot square is the same, so it's not changing that.
Okay.
It's not making that more nonconforming by changing it from one zone to the other.
Okay.
But it is non-conforming, is the point. I agree with you.
Very good.
And just on the CAM, well, just one point on CAM is Mr. Kenny apparently reviewed a different plan, and if you look at Mr. Kenny's CAM coastal area report, you'll see that the date of the plan that he reviewed is not the site plan that is before, that I saw before the commission, which I understand is a 2013 plan, and Mr. Kenny reviewed a plan that was apparently prepared in 2015, and I would urge the commission not to adopt a plan that's not based on the drawing that's been provided to the commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Green. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to be heard on this?
No, they can't.
Good evening. I'm Maisie Stanovich, and I'm representing the properties at both 57 Sasko Hill Road, which belongs to my mother, and the property at 73 Sasko Hill Road, which is now in an estate for my aunt, and I am the executor of the estate. What I'd like to say is I was also very involved with the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association. but tonight my comments are really just my own comments, okay? First of all, I also want to thank you for all of your efforts in the past, because I really admire what you do, because these are some really tough decisions. And I just would like to just shed a little bit of light on that property, since my family has been there on Sasko Hill for over 100 years now. It's 101 years that we've been on Sasko Hill. 56 Sasko Hill Road was one full property. What happened was, way back when I was very young, the woman that lived there was an artist. Her husband rolled a garage down from up the street, put it where these buildings are now located, and she used it as her studio. Over time, it got embellished, and it became, at some point, I think, obviously a much bigger studio, etc. When the property was purchased by the gentleman who was the chiropractor, it again was purchased as one property. He went to the town, and I say, looking back, unfortunately, the town split the property, which should have never happened, making it into two parcels. It was all one parcel. And that's how we got that crazy line, that's how you've got the little house back there and a shared driveway, et cetera, et cetera. So I just would like to say to you that because maybe something happened in the past that probably should not have happened, let's not keep going down the road trying to force fit everything. Imagine for a second you're on Sasko Hill and that's all one piece of property. That's much more in conformity with the way Sasko Hill properties are. All right, so I just want to, obviously you all weren't there way back when, so I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of the highlights. The other thing I will say, and I know it's not really part of this, is my only concern is that whatever is there, how it, number one, appeals to the neighborhood, does it fit in the neighborhood? And number two, I'm very heavy on traffic as far as that goes. And, I will tell you, I've appeared before you before and I talked about traffic, and I must say it's really getting worse and worse and worse. There are so many people now, and I'm so glad because they're healthy, jogging, on bicycles and whatever. And Sasko Hill is such a beautiful road. People love to go up and down it. And it's, with all the traffic, it's really very intense. So I will say the small office building that's been there for many years, there were never really any problems with the traffic. It was fine. It's just unfortunate that, now people want to make things different. But if it were to stay just as it is, no problem, okay? So that's all I really have to say, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to be heard on this? Going once, going twice. Attorney Rizzio.
Still perplexed.
You are still perplexed?
Yeah, in the end, we get down to this. You're in your acting in your legislative capacity. It seems to me the property was built, when it was occupied for the chiropractor, and originally, as Attorney Green said through variance, I'm glad he reminded me, they required actually that it be a home office. So it was used as a house and as an office. You look at it, it was built as a house. It was built as a residence. So I never said the property was zoned Residence 1. It just, that's the way it was built, that's the way it had been used, and then over time worked its way into use as a commercial property. And you're at a dilemma here. I think it's pretty clear in talking, as you heard from Commissioner Wendt, Mr. Wendt, as I was going to point out, that I don't think there's going to be any effect to the neighboring property owner with regard to the setbacks. Setbacks are going to be the same. There's not going to be any negative effect, and I got to tell you, they opposed. You're in a situation, I think Commissioner Alessi pointed out, was what do you do here? I mean, if Sandy comes by, or we have another Sandy, and this property gets knocked down, you're just going to condemn the property? You don't want a house. Everybody was crying for a house, yelling about a house. They wanted residential. This was almost being accused of pulling a fast one to sneak this office building onto something that should never been zoned commercial. what was zoned commercial, the regulations that all apply to commercial, all allow for a structure that would be bigger than goes there now. To make it FEMA compliant, to make it financeable, to make it saleable, in fact, our brokers here would certainly be able to talk to you about it, it's very difficult for anyone to buy a property in today's day and age, to insure a property, to transfer a property without the ability to make it FEMA compliant. So if we were going to make an office building, and it's going to be 3,000 square feet, and use it as a general office, along with that comes the need for probably 9 to 10 parking spaces, and to just replicate the same height you have now at 18 feet high. No one is going to support that. Everyone's going to say it's FEMA compliant, but now we got an office building flying out of the air on a residential property on the entryway to Sasko Hill. How do you prevent that from happening? Is you turn it to Residence A, and you allow a home to be constructed on that property, which seemed to be an overwhelming indication of what I got at our last meeting, was that what everybody wanted. And like I said, it's very upsetting to me, and I kind of lost my patience with Attorney Green today, because my client would not have spent the money on plans, would not have spent the money on going through all of this, all these machinations to get to where we are today, to just be held up. We want to move this property forward. We want to make it FEMA compliant. We do not want to have a negative impact on the neighborhood. Do you have the ability, the property's a weird piece. It's going to be non-conforming, whether it's DCD or Residence A. The amount of the non-conformities are, I think the use is as non-conforming as possible, because you have a property that's non-conforming with regard to parking for 3,000 square feet, but it's been there. You have the parking with regard to, and then consistency of use has something to do with it. So I think when this commission looks at it in its legislative capacity, you're looking as to what's appropriate. If the commission decides we're going to review our zoning map and we're going to draw a line where we believe the commercial district should end, my gut instinct is the theory was not to go one lot back to create greater setbacks, to take non-conforming properties, to create better, make them zoned commercial, so that you get the property in front of it to get a bigger, to have less of a screening and less of a buffer from the commercial area. The idea, and I have the proof of that, is what happens is, so pursuant to your planning boundaries, you have Southport, center area, and this, yes, Mr., and I can pass those out. Mr. Green pointed out that Southport starts at the west side of Sasko Hill Road. If you look at the zone line from Sasko Hill Road, you'll notice up for this property, almost everything zoned commercial down the road from Sasko is really only one lot deep off the post road. Also, 10 Sasko's not landlocked. I believe there is a driveway. I think I've been in and out of it on the post road, so there is access from the post road from 10 Sasko. I don't think the only access, and I might be wrong, but I know people that there is a driveway out onto Sasko Hill Road from 10 Sasko. But if you look from Sasko Hill Road down on this map, every other property along this part of the post road, it's only one property deep that's in the DCD. So at some point in your legislative capacity, we turn to common sense. And we say we have a property that is non-FEMA compliant. We have a property that should be used for something. We have a property that evolved over years into an office use on what appears to be in a residential neighborhood. I would not call the lots off the post road, and certainly this lot and lots across the street, the post road corridor. This is the Sasko Hill corridor that starts really one lot, starts on the lot lines of the properties that abut the post road.
What's there, that right now, there's a 3,000 square foot structure that's currently being used as an office?
Correct.
Okay.
That lot, that house, which would be...
I mean,
if-
it's a house,
Right.
right? It's a residential in style, but it's an office.
Correct.
Being used as an office.
And it's a non-conforming office in many ways. So, for example, it's probably got 3 or 4 parking spaces. I don't know if it get anything with regard to appropriate commercial parking spaces, turning radiuses, that to get for 3 parking spaces, if it was used by a chiropractor, you would consider that medical, it would require 5 per thousand, would require 15 parking spaces. It's used by general office. The only reason we had less office, remember we had a mixed-use project. We only had a very small office on the first floor. The second floor was going to be residential. So that's what pushed the parking requirements down. But what Jim will tell you and what Joe will tell you, the parking is pre-existing non-conforming, and you have the ability to replace office for office with the parking in the way it's arranged. Now, but you always have this problem, and Commissioner Alessia pointed out to us. If somebody wants to do something with this parcel to make it FEMA compliant, which has been a goal of the town, you now have 2 choices. You have the ability to take a 3,000-foot office building and put it up in the air, or you have the building, or whatever you can qualify for under the DCD regulations, which I believe are much more expansive than would be required under the Residence A. And under the Residence A, you'd be able to put 1 single-family home. I will say the one thing that has been uniformly by all established before this commission is that there's a traffic problem on Sasko Hill Road. A single-family home versus a commercial use of any kind will have less impact on the traffic and the safety of Sasko Hill Road. The person who was just opposing it was telling you the one thing she continues to say is how bad the traffic is on Sasko Hill Road. So the fact that you have a quiet, couple thousand square foot office use there now is a matter of luck and circumstance. It's the difference between, you had a quiet PJ Gordon's versus a Starbucks. It's a question of timing. So you can't zone that. So you're not going to be able, if the next guy comes in and he's got a really busy office, you can't do anything about it. We can substitute office for office, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you're going to exacerbate the traffic problem that you have on Sasko Hill Road. Once you put the single-family home there, you have what you have. You've changed that forever. You've locked in, and you've set your boundaries for the distinction between the commercial aspects and the commercial corridor of the Post Road and the residential nature of Sasko Hill Road. Remember, you're in your legislative capacity. I ask you to use your common sense. I will tell you, if I was back here with a 3,000 square foot FEMA compliant office building, Attorney Green would be here opposing that from some other neighbor. So the question becomes, is you have the ability in your legislative capacity to strip it all away, look at this zone map as if you were changing the zone map for the town, and say what belongs here. Do we need a single-family house on this pre-existing, on this non-conforming lot? Does that make more sense? Does that have the least amount of impact to the neighborhood? Does that have the least amount of impact on the values? Is that the thing that's most appropriate next to the harbor in your entryway to harbor, or entryway to Sasko Hill Road? Or do we leave it DCD with the ability to maybe, unfortunately, condemn this property to its current use till the next storm comes and knocks it down, because everything that would, anything to be, as Commissioner, as Mr. Green said, anything that you do to make it, to bring it up is going to end up before the ZBA, vehemently opposed by someone, so that this thing gets locked into the ground. So the property owner does have rights. He'd like to make it FEMA compliant, and he'd like to have the least amount of impact on his neighborhood, yet also protect its value. We're not having any detrimental value on anybody. We have the right to construct something safely on our property, and we have the right to have the property correctly zoned for the important use. And basically, that's our specific use. In the general overall use, as we talked about, you have to judge that and say, should this property be zoned residential? And this property, whether it's this property zoned residential, does it have a negative impact on our our master plan, or is it compliant with our master plan? I think your answer to both is going to be yes. It's consistent with your master plan. It's consistent with the uses that are surrounded, and it will have no negative impact on the neighborhood. In fact, it will decrease the traffic on the neighborhood. It will increase the buffer area, increase the green area, increase the spacing, decrease the height, and decrease the amount of coverage. I mean, I've never seen this before where, I don't know if now it's, please put it in my, it's like we're going from not in my backyard to please put it in my backyard, and that won't work either. So this is a question of, it's a very unique property, and this commission's got to make a decision as what's the most appropriate way to develop it in the future. Not that this thing's locked in forever. It's not locked in forever. Nothing is forever.
You just addressed the neighbor's concerns with the right-of-way on the driveway.
Same concerns that there's no concerns. The right-of-way on the driveway, so I guess he was saying he'd rather have a commercial establishment sharing his right-of-way than a single-family home. Makes no sense. The right-of-way is not impacted by the zone change at all. He has the ability to access his property on a right-of-way, to drive in and out over this property so that he can get to his garage. This zone change has no effect on that.
Right, so, thanks. He had two issues. One was that he could continue to gain access to that auxiliary parking paved area on his property, and you're saying this is not going to have any impact on that?
No different than if you, in changing your master plan, your zone map 5 years ago, you changed the lot line, has no effect on him.
Okay.
We are not changing anything as relates to his use of the property. We don't have the authority to do it. We're locked in deed-wise for that.
Okay. Can you just address the discrepancy, perceived discrepancy?
I was looking at the wrong map.
So
this is what was
I'm looking at a map here that we were provided in our file.
2015.
No. This one is, well, maybe I'm not looking at the right date. I'm looking at the date revisions, 12/8/2013 is the last.
No. There has been another map that was submitted to Laura today, and to address her concerns. Hold on one second. And I believe there were revised maps that were submitted to Jim that were revised as of 2015 to address the engineering comments. But that's a typo. I can say for the record it's a typo because I can tell you that our office, Neil changed the map. Neil,
Which one has a typo?
the one that's in front of you that was submitted, what happened?
The
let me
CAM
just
report
explain.
or the map? Should the CAM report say that he reviewed a map dated December 8, 2013? Or should the map have a revision date of September 18th, 2015?
The map should have a revision date of September 18, 2015, because that was based on, from that, we made map changes that were, I can state for the record that were submitted to Jim.
Okay.
Then I can also tell you, which I will submit tonight also, the map changes that were submitted to Laura today, which took care of her comments, while you got a letter in your record to say that she has, all her comments were addressed. We had the maps changed, we ran them down to Laura today. Laura looked at the maps, said it addresses my concerns, and you can deliver the maps to the town tonight. And Laura's letter, and I have a copy of Laura's letter, so I'll give these to Jim. Commissioner has Laura's comments.
The map would be...
Those comments are based on those revisions, which had nothing to do with the zone change, only had to do with the coastal plan.
I think that for the clarity of the record, if there is a typo in the date on this map in the record,
Yes.
that you need to submit a correction.
If the commission,
At least a letter which clarifies
Yeah, there's no
that
problem.
this map
I think-
is not
yes.
dated properly.
Correct.
Okay?
But I have the maps there now with the 2015 date as of today, I believe it's as of today.
But how could it have, okay. Fine, do what you, I've said what
I will also tell you,
think.
all of that relates to the coastal application with
Yes.
which you can condition that we straighten out the dating issues with the planning and zoning department prior to the issuance of any building permit.
Got it.
With regard to the zone change, the map stands as it is, the surveys are correctly dated, and they are correct. They're two independent applications, and I think I'm going to leave you to your own devices, but I will suggest that we satisfy all the considerations necessary for a zone change. This is clearly not spot zoning, as we tie into the residents a zone, and we believe, and it's funny because I heard your deliberations with regard to the Black Rock Turnpike application, and it led me to believe that this was going to be one of my easier presentations going forward, because it just seemed to make so much sense. And in this instance, it does make so much sense. So respectfully request this commission grant this application. I apologize for putting you, I thought I was going to be up for 15 minutes. I apologize for putting you through this lengthy discussion. I just ask that common sense prevail, and I think that this is the appropriate zoning designation for this property as Residence A. I thank you for your time. I
Thank you.
appreciate your commitment, and I'll see you again shortly, and good luck to everybody in the election.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Close the public hearing on this item, and I'll adjourn the meeting.